How could we justify that? There's no justification for using our money to kill children. I have children.
Using the money of the taxpayers.
Of course, using our
American
money.
taxpayers.
You cannot say, oh, well, the blacks in the South United States, they deserve to be slaves. No, they were taken from Africa. Just like the Palestinian people did not deserve this situation. It was imposed on them from outside.
You have a unique story to tell about Syria. You fought in Syria.
I did. I
Okay.
did.
It was apparent for you being there on the
Absolutely.
ground. You have witnessed that.
They're
We're
armed,
talking about ISIS. We're talking about Al-Nusra Front.
These forces were so cruel, so barbaric, but they were supported by the West. They were. And their goal was to overthrow the government of Bashar al-Assad, to get rid of Russia from the region, and of course, to try to destroy the axis of resistance, this line of resistance.
حلقة جديدة من سردية عز في موسمه الثاني. أسعدتم أوقاتا. ضيفي لليوم هو كريستوفر هيلالي. Hello, Christopher.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure. Christopher, you are a researcher, geopolitical analyst, independent journalist, teacher, executive board, and international secretary of ACP, which is the American Communist Party. I'm very glad to have you in this episode. Actually, the end product sitting here now is a unique combination. Your father is Iranian, your mother is Greek. One is Muslim, the other is Christian Orthodox, and you're American. So definitely you have passed through many experiences and you've witnessed many historical incidents which show that you have an interest in history. Having this interest in history and having witnessed this rich experience, why did you decide to talk about Palestine in the aftermath of October 7th and about the Lebanon and the oppressed people in Lebanon in the aftermath of September War, which Israel had on Lebanon?
Well, of course, as you rightfully point out, my family background has shaped me, who I am, what I believe in, the values that I really put all of my faith in. So both sides of my family, my mother's side and my father's side, were very political and revolutionary. My father participated in the overthrow of the Shah of Iran in the Islamic Revolution
In the year 1979.
as part of the Revolutionary Guard. And my mother's family were communist partisans against the Nazis when they invaded.
Wow.
And also against the monarcho-fascists that were backed by the US and the British after the war, in our civil war. So I grew up in this crucible of politics, of all of these revolutions, of all of these struggles of oppressed peoples. So I always joke with my friends, I say I was born with Palestine on my tongue as well as all of the other conflicts of the world, because our dinner table conversations, our whole social life was about these issues.
Was revolving around these issues. Yeah.
Absolutely. So after October 7th, there was just a continuation and escalation of my activism for Palestine, because we had already been very active in the years prior, working with many prominent people, Noam Chomsky, Norman Finkelstein, many other prominent voices, where I was a student in Boston. And of course, we had been advocating for the Palestinian people. We had been advocating against for Israeli aggression in Lebanon. We remember the war, right? 2006. And this period of time. So we were very active at this time against this level of violence, against apartheid nature of the regime. So after October 7th and after Israel's incursion into Lebanon and its aggression against all of its neighbors, we were at the forefront. We were at the vanguard of struggling for peace, for justice against the war machine, against Israeli far-right policies, fascist government, and against the United States for arming them with all of these 2,000-pound bombs, intelligence equipment, everything that they provided them.
Using the money of the taxpayers.
Of course,
using
using
our money.
taxpayers,
using your money.
Right, of course.
Yeah.
How could we justify that? There's no justification for using our money to kill children. I have children. How could I advocate my money going to kill other people's children?
But apparently it's being justified.
Of course it's being justified.
And those who are justifying, they're having a strong argument, and this argument has led to the Republicans being in the presidency now in the US, having strong ties with many Arab nations, killing the top leaders of Hamas, of Hezbollah. So how are you using your counter arguments to justify your narrative, your side of the story?
Well, one thing, of course, as a history teacher, we need to teach the history. History did not begin on October 7th.
Definitely not.
Of course not.
But who writes the history?
Exactly.
The victorious or who?
And
who
this is one of the big questions,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Because, for example, our textbooks will do the same sides. Oh, well, Jewish people suffered in the Holocaust. Yes, true. But it doesn't mean that they have to impose suffering on the Palestinian people.
Exactly.
For example, in the 1940s, right? The Nakba, is it the Nakba or the Jewish War of Liberation? They tried to play both. Well, it was a catastrophe for the Palestinians, but Jewish people got their state. Yeah, but you cannot do this. It's not equal.
Exactly.
It's not an equal situation. So part of my work as a teacher is also to question the historical narratives that we teach our students, because we reproduce the systems of oppression, right? So one of the things that I've taken, very importantly as my task is to teach students to understand a wide variety of sources. Yes, there are sources that are pro-Israel, but there are also sources from below. For example, we remember the great scholars like Edward Said and many others
The
who have written about it.
Orientalist view, yeah.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
And even, for example, Ilan Pape, who's written the great book, and I had a chance to spend time with him in graduate school. So when you look at that, when you analyze that, you can understand that with a broader view of history, you understand the nuances of what's going on. You understand, why does Hamas exist? Why is there a resistance? What happened in Oslo, before Oslo, after Oslo? What happened in 67, before and after? 48, before and after? And with that understanding, you can have a good understanding of the situation as it stands now. For example, most people don't remember the March, the March for Return, right? This huge, popular, peaceful demonstration that was violently suppressed with hundreds, if not thousands, of Palestinians being killed by Israelis. And this was peacefully. So they said, we tried it peacefully. Nobody said anything. So of course, what choice do we have? If the international community is deaf, we have the right under international law for resistance. So one of the things that I did as a journalist was to go in to speak to different Palestinian leaders.
So you were, as an academician, interested in history. You used your hat as an academician, as a journalist, and as a speaker in many occasions and in many places as the UN. So what's the common denominator between all the messages that you try to convey to your different target audiences?
The message is one of justice. The message is one of oppression and understanding who is oppressed and who's the oppressor. It's very simple calculus, right? We cannot make we cannot equalize the situation of a slave to a master, for example.
Exactly.
You cannot say, oh, well, the blacks in the South United States, they deserve to be slaves. No, they were taken from Africa. Exactly. They were sold into slavery. Just like the Palestinian people did not deserve this situation. It was imposed on them from outside, not only by the Jewish people living there. It was done by the colonial powers, by Britain. We remember Sykes-Picot, Balfour Declaration, how many things that helped to shape the region.
Going back to 1916 and 1918,
absolutely,
it's more than 100 years now.
Absolutely, from the collapse of the Ottoman Empire. So when you understand that, you can then help to bring about some common way of speaking about it, a common narrative about it. So that's been the common denominator, has been to understand this is not a question that is so theoretical. This is ultimately a question of justice and a question that requires solutions.
Can you elaborate on your experience about speaking in the UN in New York, and what were the messages and how were these messages received?
So in the United Nations, I spoke on a variety of topics. Most of them were surrounding the war that's ongoing in Ukraine and why Russia, for example, had to be involved in Ukraine and had to confront the West. And within that topic, we spoke about the parallel situation to the Palestinians.
So you can see proximity in both. Is the common denominator when we talk about Russia, Ukraine, and when we talk about Hamas, Israel, is it the anti-imperialism, or what is the commonality between these two issues?
The common denominator is that both Israel and Ukraine are basically battleships of Western imperialism to project Western power into their regions. One in Eastern Europe with the expansion of NATO and the confrontation of the Russian Federation. The other one in the Middle East to confront Iran, to confront at that time Syria, to confront Iraq, to confront many other powerful countries at the time. And of course, when Israel was created, there were many powerful countries in the region that needed to be confronted, including Egypt and Jordan. Of course, they later signed peace agreements and became reactionary in this way. But we have to understand that this history was a way to not only fight these powers, but to control resources. The resources, for example, in this region, oil specifically, we remember the British and the Americans at this time, even in Iran, we had a coup against Mossadegh,
Exactly.
right? In 1953.
Coup d'etat, yeah, exactly.
Right. And also in Eastern Europe to control the flow of goods in the Black Sea, right? To hopefully strip the Russians of their port in Stavropol, and then to project power north in the Arctic. So you see that there's a big game being played. It's a big board. They used to say the great game, right, in Central Asia. But this is the grand chessboard for these players, and the Western powers continue to try to advance their aims with the goal, ultimately, of projecting their power at infinitum, right, forever. They want to be hegemonic forever. But of course, the people of the world, and especially the global South, cannot accept this forever.
Yeah. Before starting this episode, we were talking about your experiences in Libya and Western Sahara and Iraq and many other places, and in Syria as well. So, being a guru in history, can you elaborate on each one of these experiences, and what's the commonality between these experiences, and how can you link these experiences to that of Lebanon and of Palestine?
Sure, of course. I mean, for me, all of these places were ultimately questions of justice and questions of confronting empire.
Correct me if I'm wrong, as if you're connecting the different pieces of the puzzle, fitting them together to create a big picture.
Absolutely.
about this Western imperialism.
Absolutely.
So,
and to create a mosaic, right?
A mosaic,
because each one is unique.
Exactly.
Each one has its own
Its
people,
particularity.
its particularities, but its universality is this imperialist struggle, right?
So a sentence or two about each one of the countries or the states which I've
Sure,
listed.
of course. We remember, of course, Western Sahara is occupied by Morocco. It's a former Spanish colony. And so we are in solidarity, especially I've been in solidarity for many years with Sahrawi people against Morocco, who is supported by Israel, by the way. It was part of the Abraham Accords, and its military, technical capabilities, and even the wall of shame that it built to over 2,000 kilometers was built by Israel. In Iraq and in Syria, we confronted the creation of the Americans, the regime change in Syria to try to overthrow the government of Bashar al-Assad, in Iraq to overthrow Saddam Hussein, but also to create sectarianism for Shia, Sunni, Kurds, Yazidi, everyone to fight one another, right? Christians. It became a situation where you had to be on the ground to understand not only the complexity, but ultimately the aim of what the Americans were trying to do, which was part of this ongoing breaking up of these many powerful states into small little principalities that they could control, protectorates.
So to justify your presence and your supplies of arms, etc., you have to create segregation.
Absolutely.
Between the different sects, between the different parties.
Absolutely. And you understand this, of course, in Lebanon and in Palestine, the confessional system, the history of the civil wars, the history of all the conflicts. I know the history very well. It's complicated. It's very delicate. It's a sensitive subject here. But of course, we understand that this was not organic. This is artificial. This is something that was created artificially by powers in the West that sought to do this for their own aims, not for the good of the people, but for the good of their shareholders and their powerful elite that wanted something here, and they
Who
created
are the primary shareholders?
Who are the primary shareholders?
Yeah.
Well, it's many. It's ship owners, merchants, traders, people in natural resources, oil, many things. You understand that for them, this area of the world was a big casino, and they could do with it as they wished. They didn't care about the people ultimately, but they cared about, for example, making a part of the world for their playground. And that they could take the resources without giving any money to the people, that they could come here and enjoy vacations without providing any social services to the people.
So the imperialist mindset.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so that's
the
what
colonial
connects.
one.
The colonial one. That's what connects all of these. And it's not only in this region. It's everywhere. Cuba, Nicaragua, Venezuela, in East Asia, in Korea, everywhere around the world, it has been the same story. In Vietnam, in Laos, wherever the imperialists are, wherever colonial powers are, this is the situation that develops.
You have a unique story to tell about Syria. You fought in Syria.
I did.
Okay.
I did. I had my family.
So this is an additional hat to the many other hats which you have. So what happened?
So I was working. Of course, I'm ethnically Kurdish from Iran, and it was very important for me while working in Europe with refugees from Syria that they told me, you should go and defend our people and defend Syria against these jihadist forces, these Wahhabi and Salafist forces that were coming and killing not only Kurds, but Assyrians, Armenians, Shia. Many Shia were being killed. Even Sunni who didn't agree with the caliphate, right? With this really fundamentalist groups. So I went. I've said that you're right. I must defend the people. We must protect the Syrian people and the state. And so I went, and I was there for 9 months in the campaign in Raqqa and in Tabqa, and we saw what was happening on the ground with these forces. These forces were so cruel, so barbaric, but they were supported by the West. They were. Ultimately, they were supported.
It was apparent for you being there on the ground. You have witnessed that. We're talking about ISIS. We're talking about a Nusra Front.
Absolutely. Absolutely. They were supplied. They were supported by other powers, regional powers, whether it was the Gulf states or Turkey, other forces that were aligned with the West. And their goal was to overthrow the government of Bashar al-Assad, to get rid of Russia from the region, and of course, to try to destroy the axis of resistance, this line of resistance that was cutting through the region. But I fought alongside Shia militia. I fought alongside Syrian Arab Army. We fought alongside the Russian peacekeepers in the region. And across the river were Syrian Arab Army and General Soleimani in these battles, right? So we were there. We were part of one struggle. However, strategic mistakes were made. The Kurdish forces decided to side with the Americans against my wishes and many other comrades' wishes. And so I left because I could not tolerate making a struggle against jihadism only to bring the Americans who didn't care about the people and who would betray us again. And now you are seeing the fruit of that. Now in 2025, we see where that policy, that short-sighted policy led us to the destruction of the Syrian Arab Republic, to the ending of what was once a strong, secular, multi-religious, multilingual state, and to the development of something that is akin to what al-Baghdadi wanted to make in Raqqa. And it's very sad for me, disturbing, because so many people died and were martyred, were shaheeds for this struggle. And now to have it like this, it hurts me, it pains me to see this.
From your perspective, how has the global response to Palestine changed in the recent years? After the activism, after the grassroots initiatives, the new platforms, the upper hand which the new platforms have with respect to the mainstream media, how has the narrative changed?
The narrative has changed completely. When I was, over 15 years ago, when I was in school and was active in the Palestine movement, it was much more on the fringes, on the edges of society.
Yeah.
There was a mass consensus of support for Israel, regardless. That consensus has slowly eroded and fractured. So we're seeing now, for the first time, we're seeing a major push by young people and old people, by Muslims and Jewish people and Christians and atheists of all political persuasions, religious persuasions, to come together to fight for the Palestinian people. So we have never seen it so big right now. We have never seen it so expansive. And right now, one other benefit is the development and proliferation of social media. Now we have many independent journalists like myself who are not tied to any major corporation or publication that has editorial control over what we say, how we say it, and who we can interview. And so we're able to get the facts out there.
You're able to get the facts out there, but you have to be smart in finding new ways to manipulate the algorithms of these social media platforms, which are biased to the Western narrative.
Absolutely, for sure. And I think that, some of my great comrades and friends, like Jackson and others, have been able to do this, have been able to understand a little bit more how the algorithm works. And that's why some people say, why do they switch positions? It's to manipulate the algorithm to continue to be on the top, right? But they don't. But people have to understand that sometimes you have to play dirty in order to get it out, to get our message out. We have to. Otherwise, we'll be silenced.
You'll be shadow banned.
We will be shadow banned, or we will completely be eliminated from the social media scene. And we've been banned on many platforms, and our work has been removed from platforms. So we must continue to advance by any means necessary in this way to get the message out. And that's the most important thing at this point. Because the Palestinian people, the people in Lebanon who have a voice but no one can hear it, we must be their voice.
Exactly.
That's a great responsibility for us to be able to give that voice to them.
To be the voice of those who are oppressed.
Absolutely.
Wherever they are.
Absolutely.
And apparently that's what you're doing through your presence in many states during the periods of oppression. Being in Lebanon now, how can you see the future of the axis of resistance?
Of course, many people are quick to jump and to say the axis of resistance is failed and is collapsing, or it was completely successful. I think one thing is true, that the people have stood against a barbaric, rogue nuclear power, that is the state of Israel, quote unquote, and they were able to resist. They were able to do so with dignity. And no matter the cost, whether, of course, it was the cost of the martyred Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah and all of his compatriots and all of the people, innocent people, children, elderly, women, whoever.
In addition to the martyrdom of the leaders of Hamas as well.
As well,
Yeah.
of course, the martyrdom of brother Ismail Khania, right, in Tehran, and so many other leaders, Yahya Sinwar, right? So many who were martyred. What you saw was, it didn't matter rich or poor, it didn't matter leader or not leader, everyone was equal according to the resistance, but also in the eyes of Israel, everyone was worthy of death, right? No matter if you were the leader of Hamas or if you were a newborn child who couldn't even say a word, right? And so this must be emphasized, that for us, the victory is always because we are on the side of justice. And so regardless of the cost, and we know this from history, Vietnamese people gave 5 million Vietnamese to defeat the Americans. But in the end,
Algeria.
they defeated Algeria. Even in Afghanistan, the Americans didn't win. After 20 years in Afghanistan, the Taliban came back and won. Why? Because you cannot destroy a people on their land. You can't, no matter what you do. And even
many European states in the aftermath of the Second World War were war-torn, actually.
Absolutely.
And this doesn't show that they were defeated. On the contrary. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So are you worried about the fate of this axis of resistance?
I am not worried, because so long as there are people in Lebanon and in Palestine who struggle for justice, the resistance will continue. As long as there are people of conscience, people who are willing to pay the ultimate price, who are willing to sacrifice themselves in the name of a greater cause, there is no way you can be defeated. And of course, for those who are religious, you understand that for those who understand the road to Karbala, there is no other way. That is the way of justice, right?
But the dynamics of the battle should be a bit different now. If you want to perceive things from a geopolitical perspective, in the aftermath of what happened in October 7th, September War, Uli al-Ba's, which Israel has started on Lebanon, how would the dynamics be in the upcoming future, in the near future at least?
It depends on a few factors. First of all, it depends on the United States and what they end up doing in the region. Because if the United States is unable to carry out a ceasefire plan that brings about a normalization in Gaza, we could see another escalation. And we know this from the leadership on the ground, from Hamas in Gaza, that there will be no plan of transfer, right?
Do the resistance groups and the communities which surround them, do they have the power, the energy, the stamina to stand another war in the very near future?
I believe they do. I believe they do. I believe they have no choice. Because if you are left in a situation where if you don't fight, you could lose and set you back decades, if not longer, then what choice are you left with?
Your only resort is fighting.
Your only resort is fighting. And this is well understood, I believe. And I believe that many commentators and analysts have rightfully pointed out that in this situation, if, for example, Israel once again does not do phase 2 of the ceasefire and increases the escalation again, what will the people there do? They must fight. There's no choice. And we know that the regional players cannot stand the pressure again. Jordan and Egypt, for example, cannot stand the pressure of another war on Gaza or a further escalation in the West Bank, which, by the way, Netanyahu now has said that he wants to escalate things in the West Bank even further. If that happens, it will create instability in Egypt and Jordan, and it could further erode stability in the region. So the entire geopolitical equation hinges on this very fragile ceasefire moment and on the situation of what happens diplomatically with the United States and other powers. If they fail, the resistance will continue regardless, but a lot of dominoes might fall. So I am just waiting and seeing. I wish I had a crystal ball and I could give you the truth of what is to happen. I think we would be in a better position. But since I can't do that, what I can say is that I believe that people will continue to struggle because there is no other option for them.
Yeah, and definitely you don't have the crystal ball because we live in a very volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous region.
For sure.
But the people who are oppressed definitely, when they don't have any other resort other than fighting, will continue to fight, despite the last two wars which we have witnessed, whether October 7th or the September war on Lebanon. Christopher, Hillali, through the different hats which you wear as a researcher, as a geopolitical analyst, as a journalist, teacher, and your position in the ACP, you've been one of the very active voices and impactful ones, and you voiced out the concerns of the oppressed. Thanks a lot for being a guest in Sardiyat.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all of the Lebanese people for our hospitality and for our love.
You're most welcome.
Thank you.